Prior to the guns, thunder, and trenches dividing the ground, Europe was like an imposing mansion with delicate china and inflammable curtains. The late 19th and early 20th centuries were a contradiction, an era of advance, innovation, and empire, while beneath it seethed a mesh of tensions twisted like an effective fuse. The great powers marched across the world stage proudly and suspiciously. Germany, united only lately under Otto von Bismarck's iron grip, was growing with a speed that caused anxiety. Its industries prospered, its navy grew. Its Kaiser, Wilhelm II, was restive and determined to claim a place in the sun. Britain, the mistress of the seas, watched German naval aspirations with distrust. France, humiliated by defeat in the Franco-Prussian War of 1870, seethed with unspoken vengeance. Austria-Hungary, a multifaceted, crumbling empire of little cohesion, clung for dear life to mastery of the Balkans. Russia, the vast, lumbering giant of the East, played the protector of Slavic peoples, and those under Austrian rule especially. The continent had been divided into two military camps: the Triple Alliance Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy, and the Triple Entente France, Russia, and Britain. Although their alliances were defensive, they had made a dangerous commitment. Any misstep could plunge all the powers into war. It was a chess game in which any move risked setting off the whole game. Nationalism coursed like a fever across Europe. It was pride in Germany. It was determination in France. It was desperation in the Balkans. Small countries like Serbia wished to expand to unify Slavs under one flag, and Austria-Hungary wished to prevent them from exactly doing that. In the coffeehouses and parliaments, in barracks and legations, everybody sensed war on the horizon, but nobody could have predicted how terrible it would be. Industrialization had changed the nature of war. Steamships, railways, and telegraphs connected armies like never before. Mass production had made possible the arming of millions of men. Rifles were accurate, artillery was devastating, and the very worst of all, the machine gun capable of killing hundreds in minutes was in reserve. No one had any conception what these weapons would do when deployed at large. Diplomats and generals, as well, had their game. Armies created complex mobilization schemes. War was discussed as a science, strategic, fast, and winnable. What they were getting ready for, however, was a short war. A war of movement. A war of honor. What they got was a meat grinder. And amidst all that was Sarajevo. June 28, 1914, was a hot and sunny day in Sarajevo. The town was abuzz with anticipation. Austria-Hungary's Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife Sophie were in town, a diplomatic visit to calm the nerves of newly annexed Bosnia. But beneath the ceremony and protocol, there lay hazard. 7 young men lined the route of the Archduke's motorcade. Members of an underground Serbian-sponsored group, known as the Black Hand, they were equipped and were planning to make an attack for Slavic liberty. The morning attempt at an Athena grenade thrown glanced off the car and exploded under a following vehicle. The Archduke proceeded. Later, on his way back to visit the injured, a wrong turn drove his car straight at 19-year-old Gavrilo Princip. Standing mere feet away, Princip fired his pistol twice. Franz Ferdinand in the neck, Sophie in the abdomen. In a matter of minutes, both were dead. The globe was stunned. Austria-Hungary was outraged. Though Princip was Bosnian, his allegiance to Serbian nationalists and the role of Serbian officials created a domino effect. Austria issued an ultimatum to Serbia. Serbia acquiesced to most demands but refused to agree on others. Then, coalitions came to life like the operations of a gigantic machine. Germany backed Austria-Hungary, Russia backed Serbia. France pledged allegiance to Russia. Germany issued a declaration of war against Russia on August 1st, followed by France. When German troops moved into neutral Belgium, Britain entered the fray. The lights of Europe, British Foreign Secretary Edward Grey wept, were being put out. What was next was not justice. It was not revenge. It was war. Millions applauded in August 1914 as troops paraded through capitals. Flags fluttered, bands marched, and young men took trains for what they believed would be a brief, triumphant campaign. Never before had the machinery of war rolled so vast. Diplomacy was dictated by mobilization timetables. Generals activated plans years in the planning. Germany's Schlieffen Plan was a rapid sweep through Belgium and northern France to sever Paris from the rest. The plan nearly worked. Belgian resistance delayed them, and the British Expeditionary Force got there in time to help the French at the First Battle of the Marne. There, in September, a counterattack pushed the Germans back. Both sides dug in. Trenches stretched from the Swiss border to the North Sea. The Western Front was born, a graveyard of movement, hope, and sanity. In the other theaters, Russia advanced into East Prussia but was driven back at Tannenberg. Austria-Hungary was beaten in Serbia and struggled against Russia. The Ottomans joined the Central Powers late in 1914 and opened Caucasus and Middle Eastern fronts. The summer campaign became a global inferno. The Western Front was a place of hell. Men lived in trenches in the earth, waist-deep in mud, full of lice and rats. Snipers looked for any mobile target. Shells tore through bodies and nerves. Poison gas brought choking, blinding death. No man's land, the land between the lines of enemy, was a desolate wasteland of craters and dead bodies. In 1916, two battles defined the year, Verdun and the Somme. The Germans sought to bleed France white at Verdun by attacking a symbol of French pride. The French did hold, but at horrific cost, over 300,000 killed. At the Somme, the British launched an offensive to relieve Verdun. On July 1, 1916, they suffered 57,000 casualties in a single day, the worst in British military history. The battle raged for months, resulting in over 1 million dead and wounded on both sides. And the front barely moved. Technology evolved. Tanks made their debut. Aircraft began bombing and dogfighting, but nothing broke the deadlock. As the West came to a standstill, the East continued in limbo. Russia was invaded by both Germany and Austria-Hungary, but was limited by poor leadership and outdated infrastructure. After achieving initial successes, they lost ground throughout. In 1917, exhausted, hungry, and disillusioned, the Russian people rebelled in revolution. Tsar Nicholas II abdicated. A provisional government carried on the war, but a Second November uprising put the Bolsheviks in power. Lenin, promising peace and land, signed the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk in March 1918, ending Russia's involvement in the war. This freed German troops to move west, but at a gruesome cost. Russia was ravaged by civil war. World War I was not confined to Europe alone. Colonial powers clashed with each other in Africa, Asia, and the Middle East. German colonies were seized by British and French troops. In the Middle East, T.E. Lawrence of Arabia led Arab uprisings against the Ottoman Empire. At sea, the British blockade strangulated Germany's economy. As a countermeasure, Germany turned to unrestricted submarine warfare. Cargo carrying civilians was torpedoed without warning, like the RMS Lusitania in 1915 with American passengers on board. Fury boiled. Germany resumed full-scale U-boat assaults in 1917, wagering that it could throttle Britain into submission before America joined the fray. They lost the wager. On April 6, 1917, the U.S. went to war against Germany. President Woodrow Wilson cast the war in terms of fighting to make the world safe for democracy. Unready at first, America came on strong. American forces, the Doughboys, started showing up in massive numbers by mid-1918. Germany launched a massive spring offensive in March 1918, hoping to win before the Americans tipped the balance. For a time, it worked. They advanced deep into France, but the Allies held. Then came the counterattack. The Second Battle of the Marne marked the turning point. Under unified command, the Allies launched the Hundred Days Offensive. German forces began to retreat. Their lines broke. Morale collapsed. Revolution brewed at home. Austria-Hungary broke up into separate nations. The Ottomans signed an armistice. In Germany, the sailors mutinied. The workers and soldiers formed councils. The Kaiser fled to Holland on November 9th. A republic was declared. 2 days later, on a train carriage in the forest of Compiègne, the armistice was signed. The guns fell silent at the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. It was all over after 4 years of war. The Treaty of Versailles in June 1919 blamed Germany for the war. The empire lost land and colonies. The army was reduced in size. Reparations were imposed. The humiliation would simmer. New nations were created: Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia, Poland, and more. Austro-Hungary and Ottoman empires ceased to exist. Russia lay in shambles. Millions murdered. Millions were wounded. An entire generation destroyed. But the world changed. Rights were given to women. Empires fell. Modern war had arrived. The League of Nations came into being, a feeble promise of peace. But the effect of war was still there. Its wounds went deep, and in its darkness, another war would rise, and more ghastly still. World War I that did not end war, but it ended an age.